Hello everyone, I'm Glenn Jones, StarCityGames.com's event coverage coordinator, and we're here at the Indianapolis Invitational with Christian Valenti.
Hey guys.
Christian's a noted grinder with a few Open Series top 8s, and we're going to talk about his Legacy deck for this event, which is both a little different and a little not so different.
Yep.
We've got an oldie goldie with Merfolk here. Tons of islands, tons of Merfolk, the usual. So let's start off with, why is Merfolk a good deck in Legacy to start with, historically speaking?
Alright, well, generally the combination of pretty efficient, cheap, efficient creatures, backed up by counter magic, is basically one of the defining deck archetypes in Magic, basically, in its history.
And we've seen a lot of success with Rug Delver using that same basic model.
Absolutely, it's very similar.
So why did Merfolk fall out of favor in Legacy, do you think?
I think with, as it was falling out of favor, Zoo was a deck, Goblins was a deck, Maverick started to rise, and the problem with small, efficient creatures that backed up by counter magic is usually their creatures just aren't bigger. They generally have pretty good effects, or in this case, they try to get bigger with lords and such, but generally just creatures with more powerful, more relevant abilities just can take over the board, and your spells don't really interact with them that well. Like, counter magic doesn't really, especially if you notice I have Spell Pierces and Dazes. I mean, a game is going to go long against another creature deck, and those spells just don't really interact with what they're doing.
Okay. So, what's made Merfolk a good choice this weekend?
Well, the existence of Reanimator doing well last weekend in the hands of Reduke, who is a fantastic player. He's certainly going to gauge the interest in other people looking to play an unfair deck like that. Show and Tell, Sneak and Show was already a really powerful archetype.
Sure.
And Rug Delver currently doing very well. And basically, Merfolk's traditional good matchups are kind of the combo-esque decks that are pretty, not, I want to say inconsistent, but thrive on getting, a few specific cards to resolve. And then other kind of mid-rangey or aggro blue decks, because your creatures have island walking, in general theirs do not.
So you're expecting these unfair decks to sort of beat down your natural predators,
which are the creature decks, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So I guess this list is pretty general, right? Like you said, you haven't really done anything special. So let's just run through your matchups. We already talked about Reanimator. It needs to resolve some key spells. What about Rug? What's your plan there?
Okay, so a Flip Delver can be pretty problematic, but the problem is they have to play a game that I don't really think they want to against you. Their Tarmogoyfs, because of the existence of Regery, they actually have to play a very aggressive game with you. Like, in most cases, historically, Tarmogoyf was a problematic card because it could out-aggro you. It was never really played great defense because even though it's bigger than all of your creatures, you can just tap it down with a Regery, island, walk right through it, and that's basically our game plan there. So Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, all these big green creatures against Rug, we just basically want to attack through their islands.
Okay, that makes plenty of sense. We've got Sneak Attack. Is that any different than the Reanimator deck? Do you have to play very differently against them?
It is a little different. Reanimator, you're really fighting over the reanimation spells and their graveyard effects very severely, because like in my 75, for example, I'm actually called to a resolved Blazing Archon. Okay. I can't beat that card once it's in play. So my plan is to either keep it out of the graveyard via remove from game effects, or to keep it in the graveyard instead of being on the battlefield. So the difference there being Sneak and Show, they revolve around getting Show and Tells and sneak attacks onto the battlefield, and really it's not like Reanimator where their spells like Exhume, Reanimate, they cost a little mana that they can theoretically play around your counter magic. That's a lot harder to do with the existence of Show and Tell costing 3 mana, Sneak and Show effectively costing 5 mana, and
okay, so you get a little additional time there, and that
a little bit of extra time, and even then they still have the same fault as most of the other combo decks playing islands, so we can still island walk through a lot of their stuff.
So Maverick was one of the deck's hunters, shall we say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And how are you addressing that with your sideboard plan?
So against Maverick, we have Dismembers for some of their key creatures.
Sure.
Jitte being the big one. So, and then Submerge, of course. So we actually bring in quite a few cards. Submerge, for obvious reasons, it's insane for tempo.
Yep.
In response to a Zenith or some kind of shuffle effect, you can really basically just break their you can just break their game plan, wide open. Jitte is basically a concession to, you can't really beat a Jitte in play of theirs, and a lot of the versions aren't playing Stoneforge Mystics now, so that's nice. You don't have to worry about them having it like every game. But really, it's your best way to beat a Jit out of their deck, and it's the best way to beat them once they don't have a Jit.
Sure.
So, like I said, that matchup is just so problematic. Basically, if you can use these spells to keep their Knight of the Reliquaries and Tarmogoyfs and Scavenging Oozes from just beating you down, you can use Jitte to beat the small problematic cards like Scrib Ranger or Mother of Ruins, the cards that Jitte just pulverizes, basically.
Sure. That makes total sense. So, what do you think are the dangers of playing Merfolk in this tournament? What are you scared of facing? What are the scary cards?
Okay, so one of the key problems I've always had with Merfolk, I played it a little bit in the past, and I always disliked that it was very much a third-dimensional deck, and what I mean by that is it basically plays around 20 lands, around 20 creatures, and around 20 non-creatures. So the problem with that is the deck cannot be a control deck. It's very much an aggro control deck and needs every element at every stage of the game. So if you have lands and just your spells, you're probably going to be at a disadvantage. You know, Force of Willing and dazing stuff, and then playing a Curse Catcher on turn 4 is not going to get you very far. Now, in hindsight, same goes both ways. If you have lands and creatures, then these creatures in general are not going to win most of the games by themselves. I mean, the unfair decks are just faster, so you have to have your disruption. So, and obviously, without lands, nothing works. So, you really have to have pieces of each of your game plans. You really have to have 2 or 3 creatures, a couple disruption spells, and lands.
Right.
So that's one of the weaknesses, for sure.
And lastly, let's talk about our one spicy meatball. We've got one Relic of Progenitus in the main deck. How do we decide that this was going to be
that's actually some advice I got from Drew Levin, local Legacy specialist. So he's, I basically showed him my deck, and I had the 21st Lord. I actually had Merfolk Sovereign, and I don't think it was poor, but it's certainly not the most impressive thing.
Nothing right.
And he made a good comment about, what are the decks you're going to be playing as well. You're going to be playing against Tarmogoyf decks, Scavenging Ooze decks, Nimble Mongoose, and Knight of the Reliquary decks, and of course you have Reanimator, the new villain in the room, so to speak. So, it's not like playing a Tormod's Crypt where you're going to draw it and be miserable. Worst case scenario, it's just going to cycle for 2 mana. The deck doesn't really have a lot of extra mana to spend, but with either Vial, it's certainly not out of the question that you just cycle it, hit a Lord, hit a counterspell.
Sure. Okay, so hopefully this one pays off under the camera,
hopefully
perhaps.
so. Yeah, maybe so.
And good luck in the tournament, Christian.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Yeah.